All right, everyone. First of all, thanks for coming. Is everyone okay?
Yeah. Fine.
It's a really short, half-hour session looking at, as it says, 3-act structure, as well as really collaborative writing, writer's block, and just getting started. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to get started. So we're going to have a look at these areas and hopefully try to sort of establish with us all that writing can be fun. I want to start just giving us little tools to help us deal with things like problems with writer's block. And I really want to show that writing should be enjoyable, even though often it isn't. It feels like a chore, there's a lot of work people have got to do, you've got deadlines to meet, and suddenly all this stuff's right in front of you and it's coming at you like a train and you think, oh my God, I can't work. See, we must have all had that, I know I have. And I want us to briefly look at what the 3-act structure is, and because there's 3 of you, how collaboration can help with all of that. So, let's get started by asking about writer's block. Has anybody here had or experienced writer's block?
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
Well, you're out of ideas and you don't have much information. You think you haven't prepared properly, maybe.
You haven't prepared properly, maybe.
Yeah.
But that first sentence as well. You're just out of ideas.
Yeah.
That feels like one to me. You're staring at a blank sheet of paper and you're all out of ideas. You haven't got any ideas. Have you ever suffered from that at all? Or you always got something going, you've always got these little creative ideas flowing one after the other. For me, it's like the way you're speaking, where I suddenly think, I haven't got any ideas. And you're just staring at the computer screen or at a piece of paper, or going and trying to distract yourself. So you have experienced it.
Yeah.
Have you ever had that thing, maybe even with an essay, where you thought, oh, I've got to get this essay in, but I'll do it later?
Yeah.
Sometimes writer's block is like that, where you want to do it later. I can't start this now. And writing creatively can be a bit like that too, when it's very easy to procrastinate and to put it off until later because it's going to be work. It's going to be hard work sometimes as well. So I want us to think about ways we can break stuff down, back down into their smaller elements, you know what I mean, and think about what it is we're trying to write. When we try to write a story, when we're trying to make a film and get a short story or a short film idea off the ground, what are the basics? So it is taking you guys back to basics a little bit. When I ask you, what is the 3-act structure? What does it mean to you, that phrase, the 3-act structure?
What means the 3 parts of it that make up a narrative.
The 3 parts that make up a narrative.
So a beginning, a middle, and an end.
A beginning, a middle, and an end. Yeah? They seem pretty sort of self-explanatory. What do you mean by the 3 parts that make up a narrative?
Well, the first part is normally an introductory, sort of like it introduces the characters and where they're from and where they are now and what the situation is. The middle is normally either something. Well, in the standard narrative is this something happens that causes a sort of like a cause and effect.
Okay, something happens that changes.
A cause that changes.
And the final act?
It's sort of normally a conclusion to where the problem is normally resolved, or
the resolution of the problem. And I like the sort of simplicity of being able to say it's a beginning, middle, and an end, because often we see films that play around even with that structurally, where you don't necessarily get the beginning at the beginning, or the middle in the middle, the end at the end. Films like Memento, where you get the end at the beginning.
But there's a resolution
There's still a resolution, and it still follows that theory that you were talking about. So let's have a quick look at that description of those 3 acts again. Act 1 introduces the main character. This is pretty much what you're saying. Introduces things to people. This sort of main character is often called the protagonist. And it tells us what they have and what they want and what they desire, what their problem is or what their dilemma might be. And it introduces us very often at the same time to the antagonist. That is their opponent, the villain of the piece quite often. More often than not, in fact. It's the good guy and the bad guy. So that's the first act, the introduction of this person and their problem and who might oppose them. And in the second act, what we were saying, it's the complication of the problem of the story. And it's often the most dramatic part of any story. Really, suddenly things get complicated, and they get complicated, and that protagonist, that main character, experiences some form of confrontation, an obstacle, something in his path, on his journey, something that he needs or she needs to get over to complete that journey. And that final act, the third act, the resolution. Things are resolved. It means it tends to solve the problem, whatever the problem was that that main character faced. It wants to resolve those things, often for the reader or the audience. It's usually the triumph of the good, the protagonist, over the evil or bad, the antagonist, with rare exceptions. You can probably think of a few exceptions when bad triumphs in the end, but fewer and fewer, it seems to me. Can anyone think of any examples of films when the good guy loses?
There is a film called Versus.
Versus?
Do you know it?
Is that the Japanese film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That kind of plays on that, doesn't it?
Yep.
That's kind of twist at the end there.
Even Arlington Road, that was on last night, has a climax that I won't spoil, where that is in fact the twist, the reversal of this normal storytelling outcome. And because you know that that's what the audience expect, they expect the resolution to work a certain way, you can play with it. You can alter their expectations or surprise them. Because remember, this 3-act structure is not a law or a rule. It's just an observed structure. People have looked at stories and observed 3 acts. So be careful that you know what those rules are before you break them and play with them, or else you might accidentally make a monster. Now, what do I mean by that? We'll come to that in this next section, and I'll stop that for a second.